Hey, Jim Vanosky with Manufacturing Talks. It's been a while since we talked in depth about 3D printing here. So that's what we're going to do today. I've got Blake Teipel. He's been in the business for a while. He actually founded a company called Essentium, and then they were acquired recently by Nexa3D, where he is now Chief Strategy Officer. So he is here. He's going to talk to us about their business, about 3D printing overall. Interesting place for the business right now. So I think it's a great show to tune into, learn all about what's going on with AM 3D printing right here on Manufacturing Talks. We'll be back with Blake in just a minute. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
PYS Media, your digital media relations agency. Public relations, website design, digital marketing. You get found by the customers and talent who need your solutions. You get media placements in top publications, the best job candidates coming to your website, a digital presence that gets you found by the right people. Call 616-298-8798 to get started today.
Hey, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vanosky, your host. Very happy today to be joined by Blake Teipel. He is the Chief Strategy Officer with Nexa3D, a 3D printing company. Blake, great to have you here.
Jim, thanks so much to be on the show. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's good to have you. We've not talked about 3D printing in a while, and it's high time we did.
I agree, and anytime you can talk about printing, it's a good moment, and we should certainly be talking more about it, I think. So
I agree, and we're gonna hit just that. I've got some cool stuff to talk about around there, and I know you've got a lot to share from Nexa3D. But before we do that, why don't you just tell the folks, who you are, how you got doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm kind of a maker nerd at heart. I mean, like a lot of good folks in the additive manufacturing space. I've always been working with my hands kind of my whole life. I started working for my father in a cabinet shop when I was like 6 years old, putting together kitchen cabinets and building things out of wood. I grew up in central Colorado and then went to school at Colorado State. And then I worked at NASA for a little while doing projects for the International Space Station. Learned a ton. And this was before space was cool. So this was like back in 2005. So I was like, I don't know if I want to stay here forever. There was no SpaceX, so I was like, man, this is moving kind of slow. And
Right.
I don't know if we're going to be launching stuff into space. So I went in back to kind of another love that I had, which was engines. And I worked as a mechanical design engineer for John Deere.
Yep.
And did design work for a couple of years in Iowa on tractor engines and generator engines, and that was a lot of fun. And then I chased a girl down to Texas, and she was going to Baylor University, and so I went to Waco, Texas. And this was before Waco was cool, by the way. Waco's cool now because of Chip and Joanna Gaines and Magnolia and all that. And
so you've kind of been the trendsetter on all this stuff, right?
I'm seeing a pattern here. Yeah. So maybe we're going to make 3D printing, into something even cooler. But yeah, I worked at Caterpillar for about 5 years doing design engineering for hydraulic components. And I was on a team that was able to build a factory. This was a fun experience, Jim. When you think about manufacturing and you think about like value chain and value creation, being able to be part of a team that's putting a factory together. I mean, Elon and others have talked about like the factory is complex, and it's more complex in some cases than the product that is produced. And so I got to see all that up front and up close and personal. Did that for about 5 years, and then went to graduate school at Texas A&M, Gigamags, and did materials science. My whole goal was to go upstream of design and upstream of manufacturing, because materials and design, like design's easy at the end of the day. It's, if you can design, you run CAD or you run something, making a compelling design is super easy. Manufacturing a compelling product is super hard. It's like incredibly challenging. And so your material has to survive a manufacturing process at the end of the day, right? And so I was like, man, if I can get upstream of this community of these designers that only have a certain amount of materials and only have a certain amount of processes to work with, if I can get upstream of that and help make, manufacturing and materials more productive, then I think that's a space I want to play in. So,
Mhm.
Studying material science was it for me. I did polymer nanocomposites and looked at the oil-water interface for nanofillers and plastic composites. That was really fun. Along the way, launched Essentium Materials as a startup company, along with 2 other startup companies. So I guess I got bored easy. I don't know, but yeah. And then we scaled Essentium Materials actually for about 10 years, and then we just exited and sold our business to Nexa3D. So here I am, and the amazing folks at Nexa have asked me, "Hey, why don't you look after strategy?" And so that's what I'm doing today, is looking after strategy, among other things. But it's a lot of fun.
Fabulous. And how's business at Nexa3D?
Nexa is a wonderful little company, man. I love it. And I say little just because, my time at Caterpillar and John Deere, these were large
Yeah,
organizations,
for sure.
nobody in 3D printing is that big.
No.
But Nexa is this sort of like emerging, I think this is a kind of this emerging sort of mid-market player in the additive space that is really starting to hit a compelling stride. So Nexa's got a liquid resin, sort of a photo resin technology base, and they've got a powder bed fusion technology base. And then what we've been able to do is bring in our extrusion machines. And so now Nexa3D's got kind of a one-stop shop capability to get, photo resin machines, powder machines, and extrusion machines that are all, kind of new product lines that are designed to disrupt their forebears that maybe relied on, kind of earlier technology. So we've got fast offerings across the board, and everything's designed for the industrial use case, and which I love,
Yeah.
and so, and by the way, this is an open architecture company. So if
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to buy our systems and use our materials, obviously we're going to facilitate that, and we're happy to support that, and we're happy to coach you along and do it. But if you want to use your own materials, you can, and so that's something that is really emblematic of actual manufacturing. And I think it's a strategy that more additive manufacturing companies will hopefully be employing. So yeah, it's
Yep.
early days. We've only been with the Nexa team now for about a month, but man, I'll
Oh,
tell
wow.
you, it's a team of really fast moving folks that are out here to hustle. A lot of scrappiness, and a lot of grit, which I love. And they've got 1,500 or so systems out there in the wild. They've got a global install network of over 120 resellers, and so we're growing, and we're definitely in our growth stage. But I think we're starting to hit a really nice kind of critical mass, and so it's a fun time to be at Nexa3D.
So you're the strategy guy. So you have to
Guilty.
have a good view on what's happening in the industry. So if you could just talk some about the trends in 3D printing overall, and then we'll get into how Nexa is positioning themselves to go after that.
Yeah, sure. So, when you look at the strategy, I'll call it, there's kind of a corporate strategy landscape, and then there's like
Yeah.
maybe a bit of a product, kind of a product strategy landscape, right? So maybe I'll start with the product strategy first. So there are a lot of machines that are growing in their ability to deliver industrial parts. In the extrusion space, the desktop extrusion space is surprisingly active, which is an area of the marketplace that I think a lot of folks had kind of said, well, this has been commoditized, and this is, you can buy a desktop machine for sub $1,000, and you can print a lot of performance prototype parts and performance kind of, fixtures and jigs and stuff like that. But there have been some new innovations in the last sort of 18 months or so that have really kind of turbocharged the desktop market. So some high speed little desktop machines at low cost. So that's exciting to see, growth on the product side in the
Right.
desktop space and extrusion. Another area where we see a lot of, I think, important breakthrough is on the metal powder bed fusion side.
Mhm.
So companies that are making rocket nozzles and even printing of whole rockets, for example, and so a lot of aerospace application on the metal space side, I think, is really important, and I think that's continuing to grow. And software. I mean, I can't get enough. I can't mention enough how important it is for the software in additive to continue to grow and evolve.
Sure.
And so we're seeing movement in the software space towards, I think, 2 main vectors. One would be sort of like an AI or a smart machine enabled software vector, and another would be like a CAD CAM, more of an intelligence around the build preparation for additive parts that is adopting a workflow like subtractive parts from a CAD CAM software perspective. So I think that's also pretty important. So I'll pause there for a second, but
Yeah.
there's also the corporate side, but that's kind of what I see on the product side.
Yeah. Just looking at it, outsider looking in, 3D printing itself is in a bit of a lull as a market right now, right?
It is. Yeah, it is. And that kind of teased Jim perfectly into a bit of that corporate side. So over the
Yeah.
last couple of years, a lot of money flown into
We get it.
money floweth into the space. Yeah. Money. Oh, I'm blanking on the past tense of to flow. Anyway, so money came into the space in additive. And so a lot of outside money came out, outside capital, in the form of, a few businesses that went public via SPAC merger. In fact, Essentium was one of those that was on that journey at one point in time. I think our market timing was, well, now in hindsight, our market timing was actually pretty good, because if you look at, the performance and the value that has struggled, a lot of these businesses have just, in some cases, these are really good businesses. They're delivering solid returns in terms of, shipments, and they've got good revenues, but they're not, the stocks are not performing well. And that has cast kind of a cloud over a lot of the industry. And so you're seeing, there's been a lot of discussions around mergers or acquisitions and consolidation between the big players. So Desktop Metal and Stratasys and Nano Dimension and maybe 3D Systems, So these big industrial players that are in, the upper crust here have talked about trying to merge or take each other over, but no one has. No one can get a deal. No one can get a deal done, right?
Exactly.
And so you've got you've got this flight of capital because investors have been burned. And so it's a very, thin capital environment for 3D printing right now. I mean, it's difficult to get a deal done if you're raising money. It's very, very hard. And then you've got, consolidation that kind of needs to happen, is trying to happen at the top, but can't, for a variety of shareholder rights protection, agreement reasons.
Yep.
And so there's consolidation that needs to happen in the middle of the market, but there's no money for the middle of the market, And so it's just this really interesting time where additive is, I think, having a bit of an existential moment where it's man, the world needs printing. Printing is an important technology for a variety of reasons, like the manufacturing industrial base, the United States, the European manufacturing industrial base, the movement away from, constrained supply chains of the past, for a whole bunch of sort of grand challenge macroeconomic reasons. The world needs additive manufacturing, but additive needs to kind of figure itself out still at the moment, So it's kind of an interesting time in the additive market, I think.
Yep. I agree. Again, outsider looking in, but that just broad business and technology view, I think, to me, it's a little interesting. It's like additive has gone through the hype cycle multiple times, and it's
so true.
Another one of those stages where I'm
so true.
Enormously bullish. I just think it's really this confluence of some of the aspects of the internal part you talked about, and then expectations externally. There's still this sense, I've said it a number of times, that there's these people out there thinking because additive hasn't supplanted injection molding, it's a failure, which is ludicrous, but
it's
again, it's one of that hype that got out there and hasn't been fulfilled, and we kind of have to work through it.
We have to work through it. You're right. And it's funny, I'm not a guy who believes that additive will ever supplant molding or a lot of the other high volume applications.
No,
I mean, it's just not going to, but
it's not the strength
there are
of the technology.
That's right. It's not the strength, but there's some interesting things. So for example, Nexa3D, we recently bought a business out of Copenhagen, Denmark called Additive that does a additive and injection molding workflow, a combined hybrid workflow where you print the mold insert out of a water soluble resin, and then you can actually go right into the molding process off of the printed mold insert, and you can inject a bunch of parts. So 50, 100, 200 parts, do your short run parts off of a printed tool. The printed tool can then be dissolved away if you need to. And it's a wonderful example, I think, of, first of all, material science innovation. So my materials nerds all happy, but then also, this kind of additive, subtractive, or additive, molding process working together in a harmonious way and delivering real value. The molding, the place where molding always struggles is in the short runs, right?
Right.
Cutting a tool to make 100 parts. I mean, it's terribly wasteful.
Yep.
It's terribly expensive.
Yeah,
But
that
man, we're
and
seeing
oh, go ahead.
no, we're just seeing now printing instead of, like, people always said, well, why don't you just print the part? Well, that's actually kind of hard to do in a lot of cases because
Yeah.
the part was designed to be molded. And so it's
Yep.
designed to have a certain geometry and gusseting and, mold fronts to flow together inside of a tool.
Right.
So you can't just sort of say, well, I'm just going to print the part even out of a different material, let's say, and it'll perform the same, because it's just not going to. So
Yeah.
instead, if you can print the tool or print the mold
Yep.
and then inject it, then you can use additive to fill a huge part of a market need. And I think
Right.
it's a wonderful use case.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say is kind of flipping that on its head. The other big strength I see out there is there are those things that you can't do with legacy machining and
Right.
molding technologies that additive can
Right.
do, and that's the other piece to me that it's gonna deliver in the future is, you mentioned that product design and just freeing people to do things that they couldn't even
Yeah.
envision before because they were constrained by the technology.
100%, Jim. When I sit and talk and I listen to the guys, that designed, the GE nozzle. I mean, this is probably a
Yep,
story that you and maybe some of the viewers are familiar with, but
right,
they really looked at additive and they said, okay, we're going to use, laser powder bed fusion, metal printing, and we're going to combine, you know, dozens of individual little tiny little micro components into like 2 or 3 printed components. So
mhm,
they consolidated parts. They used additive in a way to improve the fuel efficiency of an engine. And then they went into production. And it was like overall this really, beautiful sort of manufacturing story where you could highlight part consolidation and geometry freedom and design freedom, in a really neat way. And there are many, many, many examples like that
yep,
where we'll see additive really rise to provide new freedoms and new capabilities. Um, and I think it's happening all the time. So it's an
yeah.
exciting thing as well.
Another thing I've seen, in some of my coverage is how it meshes with the design software advances, bringing AI and generative,
Yep.
design to the fore, and then, coupling it with that ability to do things that legacy machining couldn't, that now you've got this whole new flow from start to finish of,
That's right.
idea to finished product, and you come up with something that no one ever would have envisioned, no one ever would have pictured based on what we've made in the past, and yet you can do it
Yep.
using that different design and what AI brings
Yep.
to the table, and then making it real in
Yep.
3D printing.
Well,
Very
Jim,
cool.
you said it really well, man. And AI is so important.
Mhm.
I credit my new boss and friend, Avi Reichenthal. He thinks a lot about
Ah,
these kind of things,
I didn't even
and
think
I don't
about
know if you,
that,
yeah,
I've covered, uh, these guys before and talked to Avi,
yeah,
several times,
yeah.
and it's been a while. I'll have to give him a holler.
Yeah, you absolutely should. But on the topic of AI, right? I mean, he is of the view, and I agree that sort of over the next 5 to 8 years, there are going to be companies which have figured out how to adopt AI and make it work for
Yeah,
them, and then there are going to be companies that are out of business. I mean,
right.
it's going to become that type of filtering mechanism on the corporate level, and so then we have to ask ourselves, as operators, how are we harnessing this technology to create value for the customer?
Yep,
A lot of folks are still kind of asking that question. I think rightly so. I mean, it's one thing to sort of have Chat GPT or one of these other, large language models help you
right.
write a press release, and that's important.
Mhm.
But man,
Sure.
when it comes to design and parameter driven design and some of these other things, I think AI is going to play an amazing role in the near term
Yeah,
at helping to really shift that design paradigm.
yeah. Now, as you look at kind of business categories, how is Nexa 3D positioning themselves?
Mhm.
Is it more of mass market kinds of things, mass production? Is it the stuff you talked about with the very specialty short run, everything in between? Where do you see your business model going, and then bringing people along with that new vision?
Well, that's a great question, Jim. First thing I'll try to hide behind it just a touch, is to say, well, I'm only in the chair for a month, so I'm still learning it a bit in terms
That's
of like
fair.
really where that business model is going to go. But what I can say is that Nexa has had incredible success on the industrial side. They've got this really nice breadth of installations across sort of factories and facilities, and they've talked openly about a project they ran with PepsiCo recently, printing the molds for blow molding, and
Yep.
so allowing Pepsi to make new bottle designs and new items in the Pepsi factory. And I think that's a great example. Another example recently on the freeform injection molding side was working with Wilson, the sporting goods company, on helping to design components for bats, baseball bats. And the folks at Wilson were just blown away by how quickly they could go through some of the design cycles on improving their products. So these industrial examples are just a couple among many, where I think we'll see also Nexa embracing more of a workflow that relies on automation as well. So an integration between the robotic industry and the printing industry, which I think will also be important over time. So that's an area where I see Nexa taking a look at playing maybe a larger role over time as well.
Another one that I've talked about in the past with others is the whole mass customization world. Is that something that Nexa is looking at as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So customization, I think, is so important, and it's such a wonderful opportunity. Now, I think what we in the printing world need to see a little bit more maturity on, I would say, is the design for customization. So, a lot of the designers of the world's widgets are still thinking through a production flow and a production process of mass production, not mass customization. So they're not necessarily looking at like, how can I give a customer an ability to choose certain features that they may want, or, whether it's putting their name into a device or a component, or whether it's really truly customizing a component to fit unique needs that customers have and doing so at low costs. That presents a really, I think, an important design challenge that I really believe our design friends, are looking at ways to embrace. But that's a challenge. It's a real challenge to design for mass customization, especially when you've got a part, Jim, that has to go into like a regulated industry, whether it's medical or transportation or something like that. Like, how do you ensure the QC and the QA of the manufactured part when each part is completely custom? It's a big challenge. Now, it's not something that additive can't do. Additive has done it, many times already, and we can do it at greater scale now. And using tools like AI, we can really rely on the machines and the sensors to report back and to tell us, hey, you had a great print, and the next print was great also. And, well, this one is actually might fail. So why don't you change the design of a certain feature so we can predict failures a priori? And that's certainly something that I think is coming, and enabled by tools like AI.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you kind of made me think it's also where our regulatory models are potentially going to have to change.
I think they're going to have to. It's a little bit like, the self-driving car quandary, right? I mean, if the car runs somebody's over, whose fault is it if the car was driving itself, right? And so you've got technology that's outpacing regulation. We're seeing that in AI, right? I mean, the AI companies are asking, for regulatory oversight so they know what the guardrails are, And I think when it comes to the design side on printing, the regulatory side is important because a lot of the work we did on the Essentium side, we're going to continue on in the Nexa side, has to do with the aerospace industry. We've printed a bunch of parts in combination with our U.S. Air Force and Air National Guard partners to replace, in some cases, sheet metal components or, other components, not structural, not load bearing, but they're in-flight components. They're flying on airplanes, right? And so, the navigating that regulatory environment is a real challenge to make sure that these parts are safe and they're produced to meet the flame, smoke, and toxicity and the V0 burn requirements for air flight parts. But we got there. We got a number of qualifications and a number of certifications for new materials and, for new print processes. And we're going to continue to push on that.
And you just mentioned materials. That's the world you came out of. And I know that's been another area of challenge when it comes to AM. How's Nexa's business with regards to getting the materials you need and positioning yourselves that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the materials side of the business is, I think, such an important side of the business. And that's kind of a, like saying the sky is blue or the gravity is real, right? But, at the end of the day,
people don't think about, though.
They don't think about it, right? Like they don't.
Like me.
Well, the iPhone came about because of material science, right? You had a capacitive touch screen with silver nanowires inside of a screen that was really high resolution and made the phone beautiful. So sort of, at the end of the day, there was coding and there was software and there was a neat hardware innovation, but material science is why we have iPhones, right? So
Yep.
it's so important to get the materials part of this right. And what we focused on at the Essentium level for 10 years was making sure we manufactured. We have a facility that in Austin, Texas, that produces over 24 grades of industrial filaments for extrusion machines that we sell through our machines. And we also sell on a web store. And in fact, we opened a brick and mortar recently in Austin,
Oh,
Texas to
cool.
sell. Yeah, I mean, there was no place you couldn't go in Austin and buy any 3D printer stuff. So we're like, okay, we've got some space in our factory. We'll let the Austin 3D printing, austin3dprinting.com. It's like our little storefront. You can buy our stuff, you can buy other people's stuff. But the point is material science. Yeah, so Essentium's been materials first. We're going to continue to do that. Nexa has worked with a lot of great partners to bring, really important resins to the market. So recently they announced an ESD safe resin for thin-walled photo resin printed parts. And so when you think about like electrical connectors and wiring harnesses, man, this is a huge application space for printed connectors, and it helps with the circuit boards and it helps with the wiring harnesses. So that's a great material innovation. I know that they will launch that in partnership with BASF. And so, focusing on, leveraging the strengths of good partners and leveraging the strengths of the inherent business is something that we'll continue to do as well.
Got it. Now, obviously, with your personal experience, Nexa clearly has, at least in the past, had a strategy of growth through acquisition. Is that something that you see continuing?
Well, yeah, I think so, but it's not going to be acquisition for acquisition's sake. I think that we'll certainly try to be responsive to opportunities that present in the marketplace. I think that it's a good time, frankly, to be acquisitive, because the valuations have really, I think, adjusted to a place where business valuations are attractive if you're in an ability. Yeah, it's a buyer's market. It is, and so that certainly means that I think it makes sense to look at opportunities. But I think the important thing that I really like about Nexa is, they have a machines factory right here. We have a machines factory right here in Ventura, California. It's right where I'm sitting, actually. And we make machines that are our design, that we came up with, that we innovated on. We make the membranes, for the photoresin zip machines in-house. And we do, a lot of that organic, structural manufacturing that I think is so core to making sure you've got that strong organic engine. And they're going to be, picking up the manufacturing of our extrusion machines as well right here in California. So like, acquisitions are important. I expect to see that continue. I think it will continue, and I hope it does. But I also am excited about the growth of some of the great products that were developed internally, and will continue to have a strong life cycle, I think.
Any big new opportunities you can talk about where you wouldn't have to kill us?
No, unfortunately, yeah. If I told you, I'd have to kill you, and it's too hard to find you. I don't even know where you're located, Jim. So
that's right.
It's just
you have to hunt me down
to find you. Yeah,
you don't want to get into that.
I know. It just took me so much time. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else folks ought to know about Nexa before we wrap up?
Well, yeah, I think it's been really important for the manufacturing community to make sure that there are cost-effective solutions out there. I mean, I remember my time at Caterpillar. We were a triple bottom line company, but all three bottom lines had to do with profit. And so if you, at the end of the day, are not able to provide a manufacturing technology at a compelling price point, then it kind of doesn't matter. Right. But Nexa has been laser focused on, providing really low cost of application, really low total cost of ownership. And in many cases, it's the lowest total cost of ownership and the lowest total cost of application that's out there. And that's because of great breakthroughs on the materials side and also on the machine side. Some of these machines that are produced, or again, right here in Ventura, California, are very, very high speed machines. So I think what I want folks to really be open-minded and thoughtful about is that this isn't your granddaddy's additive. This is the new stuff. We are really, really fast when it comes to printing parts. And some of the resolutions that I'm seeing, Jim, you could put a part. I saw some stuff earlier today, and I'm excited about what's coming down the pike here. I saw some stuff earlier today on a printed part. It was this like dragon toy thing that my 5-year-old would love. And I couldn't tell it was printed. It looked molded. It looked like a molded part. And I mean, geez, when you start getting that type of surface finish and feature resolution, and you can do so at high speeds, then you have to ask yourself, as a toy manufacturer, do I want to go to the process of molding toys, or do I want to be able to change and make new toys every week
Right.
new design, and just print it because it doesn't look printed. It looks molded. And I think that's so beautiful. So we're excited. There's a lot of good stuff in the pipeline. I'm thrilled to be part of the Nexa team. We're so excited about what the future holds for us. We're going to keep hustling and running this race and try to provide real solutions every day. And that remains our goal. So
wonderful. Well, I'm excited too. As I said, I'm very bullish on 3D printing and looking forward to seeing what Nexa3D has to offer as we head down the road.
Well, thanks, Jim. Great to talk to you. And I look forward to keeping in touch.
Yep. Good talking to you again, Blake. It's Blake Teipel. Sorry. Blake Teipel with Nexa3D, Chief Strategy Officer, taking them into the future. Thank you for joining us.
Along with a great team.
And thanks to all of you in our audience. Wouldn't be here without you. Hope you learned a lot today. I think this was an extremely educational program. I can't promise they're all going to be as educational as what Blake was able to bring us today, but they're all going to be at least a little educational. So we're here every week, once or twice a week. Tune in. Got more coming. Take care. Thanks for joining us. So long.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.